Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this circle where we can be just where we are, where we come, whoever we are and wherever we're at. Whether we're coming in our gratefulness or whether we're coming in our deep grumpiness, whether we are in great joy today or in deep sadness, whether we're feeling hopeful or whether we're feeling discouraged, whether we're feeling angry or whether we're feeling accepting, and all the shades in between. There are more than 50 shades of gray. We come in the freedom of this land and in this place where we can gather without fear, where we're free to be, free to question, free to express ourselves, free to make relationship, and we come in gratitude for the long witness of this land on which we're privileged to gather. We come mindful of the history, the spirituality, the culture of our Cree peoples who have made their home here for generations and generations. And we honor the heritage and the gifts of the Métis people of this land, and we gather with a deepening sense of responsibility and respect for our responsibilities as members of Treaty 6 and as good neighbors. So we cast this circle with each other, seeking peace and finding joy as we travel together in this time and in this place. We sing our invitation to each other to be in this circle, to come, be here. Some of us are drawn here by our quest for meaning. Some of us are here in the midst of our grief. Some of us are seeking wisdom. Among us are those who've come to search, and those who have come to grieve, and those who have come to deepen their vision.
Together
for each of us is a pilgrim on a journey.
This light that we place in our center every time we gather reminds us of many things. It reminds us of the light at the center of our solar system, our sun, our great, bright, shining star. In that star, the creativity of energy is always at work. In the crucible, in the heat and the pressure of that star, elements are being formed out of the abundant hydrogen created at the Big Bang of our universe. A symbol for us that creativity goes on at the center. Whether we see it in the day, or it's clouded, or it's in the middle of the night, the creativity goes on. May this light among us remind us of all the work and effort that goes into new things, the creation of new from the old. We give thanks to the Spirit of life that gathers us here, that centers us around this light, to be the creative effort in this time and in this place. We gather together. You know that I am Chris. Most of you know that I'm Chris. This is Anne, my friend, who is going to help us with something today. We're going to play a little game that's kind of fun to play, because we're talking about creativity today. When we talk about creativity, it means that we can express ourselves and do whatever comes to our mind. If we were art, we would be creative doing that. We would choose the colors we want. We would draw the pictures we want. We're creative in a whole lot of things. We can be creative when we play. We can be creative when we can be creative in a lot of ways. So I'm going to play a game with my friend Anne here. We're going to play the Scribble game. And if you like this game, you can play it too when you're at home, or maybe even in Kid Spirit. You never know what might happen there. I'm going to draw a scribble on this page. This is the easy part. It's a scribble. It's a scribble. Now I'm going to give this to Anne, and she's going to be creative, and she's going to see if she can draw something out of that scribble. She's going to turn it into something, maybe. We'll see what Anne does. I see what she's doing. It's pretty exciting. Wow. She turned my scribble into a Canada flag. Isn't that amazing? That's nice. That's beautiful. Oh, they're clapping for you, Anne. Okay, now, this is the part where it gets funny, because we're going to switch now. Anne is going to draw a scribble for me. Oh. Oh, what should I do? I'm nervous. Because we don't have all day. Oh, I think I have an idea. And you're a much better artist than me. Goodness. Okay. I turned it into a crown. Okay, so creativity doesn't mean you have to be excellent at it. It just means you have to try, right? Why? To be creative means you try. So we did a fun little game where we tried to turn a scribble into something creative, something interesting. So we're going to think of other ways that we're creative, even just in our normal day as we go along. Do any of you have to do chores in the day? Do you have to clean your room or help with dishes, or do any of you? Is there a way to be creative when you do that? What do you think? How can you be creative when you do a chore? What do you think? Do you have an answer? What do you think, Liam? Do you?
I want to make my bed.
Yeah. You make your bed. Do you do it? Are you creative when you make your bed? Sometimes. He is, Mom? Yeah. Oh, yes. Very good. Now, we're talking in Kid Spirit, we're talking about peace, being peacemakers. That's something we do in the world. It's also something we do with our friends and with our family. We would like to have peace in our family and with our friends. We would like to get along. We'd like to be kind. So sometimes when we talk about being peacemakers, we have to do things that are very creative. We have to compromise so that everyone kind of can have something that they like or something that they want. We have to do sometimes things that nobody thought of before. Like if you're sharing toys and you both want the same toy at the same time, we have to be creative, don't we?
Yeah.
We sometimes have to say things like, how about you play with it for a few minutes, and then when you're done, I'll play with it for a few minutes. That's being creative, right? And that's being peacemakers. So whenever we're peacemakers, we have to be very creative. So I would like to invite you to Kid Spirit. Sharing a reading from the book entitled Journey of the Universe by Brian Swim and Mary Evelyn Tucker. Because we know that life is an adventure involving both chaos and order, we sometimes want desperately to control things. And whenever our fear grows too strong, we become vulnerable to simplistic promises concerning the future. But no one knows what the future holds. All of that is hidden in the darkest night. The future is being created by all of us, and it is a messy and confusing process. What is needed is courage to live in the midst of the ambiguities of this moment without drawing back into fear and a compulsion to control. Are there guarantees? No, none. But there are reasons for confidence. When the universe was just quarks and leptons, could anyone have known that it was in the process of bringing forth stars and galaxies? Or later, when Earth emerged and life existed in the form of tiny jiggling cells, could anyone have seen in them the possibilities of the bluefin tuna or a vast temperate rainforest? We find ourselves inside an amazing drama filled with danger and risk, but also stunning creativity. This has happened many times in the past. 2 billion years ago, when the atmosphere became so filled with oxygen, all of life was deteriorating. The only way for the life of that time to survive was to burrow deep into the mud at the bottom of the oceans. The future of the earth seemed bleak. And yet, in the midst of that crisis, a new kind of cell emerged, one that was not destroyed by oxygen, but was in fact energized by it. Because of this miracle of creativity, life exploded with an exuberance never seen before. It is in the nature of the universe to move forward between great tensions, between dynamic opposing forces. If the creative energies in the heart of the universe succeeded so brilliantly in the past, we have reason to hope that such creativity will inspire us and guide us in the future. In this way, our own creativity becomes woven into the vibrant communities that constitute the vast symphony of the universe. This is the insight of poetry and science. May we find wisdom for our living. This reading comes from the Christian tradition from the Gospel of John. There was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool, called in Hebrew Bethzatha, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I'm making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. This is a story passed down by our tradition of an early community following the way of Jesus. May we find wisdom for our living.
My favorite way to be a passenger is on a train. Somehow it seems easy for me to trust that, generally speaking, the odds are in favor of the train staying on the tracks. And likely those signals and switches are going to work, and the sidings are going to be there when we need them for the safety of meeting oncoming traffic. And even though I know there are derailments and collisions, I can generally trust that most likely the track is going to get us where we're going. And seat belts are usually absent or optional. Being a passenger in a car or an airline is a very different matter for me. I do my very best to avoid being a passenger in a car. But when it comes to flying, I don't have that luxury. And even though I'm a frequent flyer, I'm a fearful flyer. The fact that not only can I not see where we're going, but I'm pretty sure those in the cockpit can't either. And so here we are in the stratosphere, relying on the voice of some guy in a room on terra firma, looking at a computer screen where digital images are telling him where we all are. And then I have to trust the skill and the technology of the aircraft builder and its operators, and I have to rely on their instincts and their advice about the best route given the current atmospheric conditions. That's a hell of a lot to trust. So whenever it gets turbulent, my eyes go to the ceiling above me, and they're fixed on that seatbelt sign, and I'm waiting for the voice from the cockpit to say, "This is your captain speaking. I've just turned on the seatbelt sign. We're expecting turbulence for the next 2 hours. Please stay in your seat with your seatbelt fastened." And then I have my little mantra to comfort me. Over and over, I say to myself, may they be skillful and wise, and may we all arrive in safety. May they be skillful and wise, and may we all arrive in safety. And then when I do hear the rubber hit the tarmac and we taxi to a stop, I release my seatbelt with deep gratitude that now I can walk beyond that turbulence into my very pedestrian illusions of greater safety and more control. There's so many ways to name these times we're living in. But it would be fair to say they are disappointingly chaotic and terribly turbulent. That values of decency and civility and generosity and compassion and honesty that we assumed were more or less fixed are caught in some kind of a whirlpool and pulled by an undertow of hatred and fear and indecency and rudeness and incitement of a less evolved state of our humanity. And somehow, to buckle up and ride out the turbulence doesn't seem like a responsible choice. This time in which we find ourselves isn't a time to sit back and relax and insert the metal end of the buckle and secure it around our hips. This is a time to be a pedestrian, to walk carefully, creatively, and imaginatively into the fog that is otherwise known as the future. Late in the first century, when the survivors of the Jesus movement were navigating their way through the hostilities and alienation of their national and their religious leaders, among the stories given to them was that story Chris read for us a moment ago about troubled waters. It was a time of deep divisions between those who were finding a new path in the teachings of their martyred leader, a path that questioned and abandoned some of the orthodox practices of Judaism and created conflict with those who were deeply settled within the traditions of the synagogue, many of whom were incited to hatred and moved to persecute and exclude those who had been their friends and who had been their neighbors for no other reason than that they were choosing another path. And in the midst of this turbulence, a writer puts this story we heard a moment ago into the experience of Jesus. On those storied stones alongside those ancient pools in Jerusalem, the first century writer places some of society's most desperate individuals. The blind, the lame, the paralyzed are waiting for the waters to be troubled. Tradition or rumor or superstition or belief, name it what you will, has it that these waters have a power to heal, but only when they are chaotic, when they are troubled, when they are stirred. And so those who are most in need of healing are waiting for that to happen, and then someone has to move them into the waters. It always seems to me this story suggests an element of competition. That maybe only the first person that gets into the waters that are churning benefits from its healing energy, or the waters are stirred only for such a short time that it doesn't benefit the many, it benefits the few. And the story has it that Jesus meets an individual who's been waiting for 38 years. For 38 years, he's been waiting with the hope of wading into those turbulent waters at just the right moment. It's hard to know what to make of that question that the storyteller puts in the mouth of Jesus. It seems insensitive to ask him if he wants to be well. Why else would he be there? Is it a rhetorical question? Or is it too obvious an assumption to make that he's still waiting after all this time? And when he explains that he hasn't found help into the whirlpool, the story has Jesus invite him to find a path to his healing in another way. Jesus invites him to walk beyond the porticos of the pool. This story, told in the context of the turbulent relationship between Jesus and the religious leaders who proceed to criticize him, it's no accident that the storyteller sets this story on a Sabbath day in order to have Jesus break the rules of Sabbath rest. It's a story at so many levels about the conflict between the authorities and the alternatives, between the innovators and the status quo, between settled dogma and an agitator. It wouldn't be the same story at all if it wasn't set on a Sabbath. So it's more than an innovation on a tradition. It created a clear conflict. The worst of times are always the best of times for creativity. The worst times in our history are the most fertile for art and literature and theater and science and imagination. The worst times in our experience are the best times in human imagination, because creativity is our natural state. And these times and this gift of creativity invites us to unfasten our seatbelts, to refuse to be held hostage by the lowest common denominator, and to bring the full power of our intelligence, of our soul, of our evolutionary energy, to walk beyond the hate into love, and to walk beyond the greed into generosity, and to walk beyond the fear into hope. I'm heartened by the insights of Matthew Fox, who celebrates creativity as the hallmark of human evolution. He says creativity is the best thing our species has going for it. He was censored by the Vatican and expelled from the Dominican order because he refused to accept the orthodox teachings of the Christian tradition that taught we were born in some kind of sin, born as fatally flawed creatures in need of divine rescue from a cursed condition. And when Matthew Fox refused to be silent about his sense that we are not heirs to some kind of original sin, but rather we are beneficiaries of an original blessing, of an evolutionary leap to beings that have the capacity to create and destroy, the capacity to choose and to respond, the capacity to mature beyond fight or flight into the complexity of being able to create good and evil. These are a few of his thoughts about creativity. My soul and my imagination were awakened this morning when I walked above the churning waters of the San Francisco Bay. The waters were churning, churning, churning as they crashed against the rocks and the shore and against one another. All this energy, all this creativity, every wave is an act of creativity on the part of nature. Where is all this churning? Where is all this creativity coming from? It comes from the universe. That place where the dynamics of energy come from the moon that sets the tides, that set the motions of the waters, from the sun that unleashes the winds that move the waves that churn the waters, from the waters and the forces that made waters to happen, from the land, rugged and mountain-filled and valley-filled below the waters, from the power of gravity that binds and loosens the rhythms of contractions and expansion. This is the nature of creativity, ours and the rest of nature's. Creativity is a cosmic habit into which our species has been invited to participate and even to explore in modes of understanding. Creativity, and with it, creation, is still very much a process. There's a river of creativity running through all things, all relationships, all beings, all corners and centers of the universe. And we're here to join it, to get wet, to jump in, to ride these rapids, wild and sacred as they be. This is not a time in our church or in our country or in our continent for the world to fasten our seatbelts and ride it out. This is a time to come together in the tensions of chaos and order, in the tensions of love and fear, to trust our capacity of creativity to do what the universe has always done, to create something complex and something beautiful out of the chaos. For there will come a time that we will have to be careful opening those overhead bins because things will have shifted. To apply our creativity in the service of justice and compassion requires us to govern our creativity with the other evolutionary gift of our humanity, our moral compass. Our capacity to discern good and evil, our capacity to use our creativity in the service of our highest values, in the service of truth and love and respect and compassion and justice and honesty and mercy and integrity. You know, fastening our seatbelts for takeoff and landing, fastening our seatbelts during turbulence at 37,000 feet is good advice. Buckling up does save lives on the highway. It's been proven again and again. But on the spiritual journey, as spiritual beings in a human experience, it's not always faithful and it's not always wise. Because our citizenry requires that we not sit back and enjoy the ride, but that we cultivate our creativity and subject our creativity to the scrutiny of our moral compass. That's the duty of spiritual beings in a human experience. Sometimes the spiritual journey will invite us to walk beyond the place where we once found meaning and make a new path beneath our feet. This is a time for each of us to pause in all that this week has held, in all of its grief and celebrations. A time to pause and wonder where it is that cosmic creativity seeks to be released in us, and how we might place that creativity in the service of love and peace and justice. We pause in this day at the end of Remembrance Week, and we bring our prayers for peace. We pray with one another. This is a season of memory for us. A week mixed by so many emotions. A week in which we have celebrated birthdays, grieved the death of Leonard Cohen and others, celebrated the marriage of Kim and Ian. A week in which we have seen our neighbors to the south elect a new government. A week in which we have remembered our longing for peace, as we have remembered the tragedy of war upon war. On this day, we remember all life that has been lost to war children, women, men, plants, animals, homes and schools and places of meeting and places of prayer. We remember all who have been touched by the tragedy of war, and we hold this memory as we honor silence. We've applied our intelligence to the arts of war and our skill to make engines of terror and torture and pain. We've prayed for peace even as we've neglected the things that make for peace. We've prayed for blessing but didn't care to offer our blessing to another, to the other. We've prayed for impossible things, peace without justice, forgiveness without restitution, love without sacrifice. May we be open to the things that make for peace, to find creative and life-giving ways to settle our grievances, heal our hatreds, bridge our differences, share the world's resources fairly, and live together in peace. We hold in our hearts those whose lives hold little hope for peace with any kind of security. So many refugees, elderly living below the poverty line, people of color in a world where white is the color that dominates, single parents with children to feed, those who are targets of racial profiling, young people recruited into gangs, abandoned and orphaned children, those who've fallen victim to inhumanity, and those who've lost their humanity to a deadly ideology. We remember this day the most vulnerable in every society. May we be a light in the darkness and throw star after star against a dark sky as we bring all of our creativity to work together to answer this and all our prayers. In the name of love, we seek to strengthen our intentions, to live more nearly as we pray. May it be so. I invite us to offer together a prayer of peace, the prayer of West Hill United Church, patterned after the prayer of St. Francis. As I live every day, I want to be a channel for peace. May I bring love where there is hatred, and healing where there is hurt, joy where there is sadness, and hope where there is fear. I pray that I may always try to understand, comfort other people, as well as seeking comfort and understanding from them. Wherever possible, may I choose to be a light in the darkness, a help in times of need, and a caring, honest friend. And may justice, kindness, and peace flow from my heart forever. Amen.
Good morning. Over a year ago, the community of Little Buffalo, home of the Lubicon Cree First Nations, up near Fort McMurray, began to live out their dream of creating a sustainable future. They began a project called Peter Pan, a Cree word meaning the coming of dawn. The impetus behind this project occurred in April 2011, and many of us will remember that was when the 40-year-old pipeline ruptured, causing the biggest oil spill in Alberta history. Roughly 4.5 million liters of oil seeped into the Muskeg peatlands and waterways, the home of the traditional lands of the Lubicon. Little Buffalo became a home that was unsafe and unhealthy to live in. Melina, a resident of Little Buffalo, who initiated this project and later became the project coordinator, shared in the latest issue of Greenpeace magazine, and I quote, "Refusing to allow our future to be written by outsiders, our community decided to demonstrate how solar can benefit our communities. Not only did this project focus on renewable resources, it focused on building healthy and sustainable communities. Today, they proudly share that an 80-panel, 20.8 kilowatt solar project sits in the heart of their community. The energy this project generates is used to power their community health center, and yes, the extra power feeding back into the grid. And you are right, the energy savings affects all in their community. It is also important to note that the young people from Little Buffalo were trained to work alongside the skilled workers they brought in to support this project. These young people gained not only important skills to build and maintain their solar system, but also expand to other communities that wish to work with them. Lubicon Cree Nation has demonstrated that this transition away from fossil fuels lies in the hands of the community and the power of the people. They ask other Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities, very much like ours, to continue to stand with them to build a green future for all. In light of the turbulent events in our world this last week, let us honor the wisdom of the Lubicon Cree Nation to build healthy and sustainable communities for all.
Each week, when we light this candle, we remind ourselves of the depth of time. So what is a 4-year electoral cycle? In a 14 billion year universe story, it's just enough time to be vigilant, to unbuckle your seatbelt, to live faithfully, lovingly, respectfully, truthfully, diligently, day after day after day. In the long walk, Nelson Mandela said, to freedom. And so we go because we do have the strength, we do have the courage, we do have the creativity we need. And we go because we have each other.